Welcome back. The Canberra Chess Club Championship is getting closer and closer. We're about a month away at this point, and therefore there's only one thing to do, and that is continue training. So let's get straight into it. In this, we are black. It is a puzzle. It's black to move, and I'm looking at queen going all the way down to e1 and giving a check. That almost looks like a checkmate, but the king can take a step forward. Once it steps forward onto g2, it'll be attacking the rook. But we can then play queen across to h1, defending the rook, giving a check, which is also a checkmate. Kind of a shame, because if it wasn't checkmate, if the king could move out the way at that point, we'd be able to take the queen. So I'm happy to take a mate in 2, 1, and 2. And we move on to the next puzzle. This one again, it's black to move. We got to be methodical. That's one of the main lessons we've learned in these past months. So with that, we're going to be forcing moves first, and the most forcing and sensible move I can think of here is queen to h4 check. Queen h4 check is not only a check, it's a checkmate because there's nowhere for the king to go and no way to intercept. That means we're up to the third puzzle here. Now straight away, I'm looking at forcing moves. There's no sensible checks that I can see. There's only one possible check, which is queen takes on h2 check, but after the king recaptures, there is no follow-up. So other than that check, we can look at some captures, and the most sensible looking capture would be rook takes bishop on c4. If we take that bishop, let's say rook recaptures, well then our queen recaptures, and in that resulting position, we're up an exchange and a pawn. So rook takes bishop seems fine. What could be wrong with that move? Let's see. Well, let's look firstly at their forcing moves. After rook takes bishop, do they have any checks available? Well, they would have queen to d8 check, but we could capture that queen with our bishop or with our other rook. So I don't think that's going to do anything. There's no other checks available. Nor are there any other captures available. There would be a threat against our queen available through the move g3. So after, say, rook takes bishop, they might play g3 attacking our queen. But there, I think we have various options, one of which is just to move the queen across to e4. And another of which might be to actually take the rook on c1 with our queen. Then if queen takes queen, rook takes queen, rook takes rook. In that position, we're still up a pawn, but only a pawn. So I do actually have to calculate this a little bit better. So let's say rook takes bishop, g3, hitting our queen. What if then rook takes rook, pawn takes queen, rook takes queen, rook takes rook. In that position, we have a better pawn. I think we're better still. We're still better in that position. I'm not sure if it's the best continuation after rook takes bishop. So after rook takes bishop, most importantly, if rook takes rook, queen takes rook, and we're happy. But if rook takes bishop and then g3 hitting our queen, we could play queen g4, but then there might, queen g4 would do it. Queen g4 would do it. So I'm not afraid of anything really. I'm going to take the bishop. And that turned out to be a whole lot of nothing. So here we've got a pretty obvious ability to skewer or pin this rook by the move bishop to c5. Skewering the rook to the king. Even if the king does move forward, we then just start pushing our a pawn forward to a4. And then when the king moves again, we then take the rook, king takes bishop, we push our pawn forward to a5, and as the king chases it, we push to a6, chases again. We'll probably get all the way to a7 before the king ever captures us. In fact, will the king ever capture us is a real question. After, let's first assume the king does capture us up there. Can we then get our king up, capture the pawn on h7 and on g6, and then just using the opposition, promote our g pawn. I think that's going to be the idea. So bishop c5, let's say king e3. If we immediately capture the rook and then his king captures us, we can just immediately start playing king h3. And he's going to have to at some point go after our a pawn. So in any case, this is definitely going to be the correct move. And turned out to be a lot easier than anticipated. Here, it looks like we can simply take the rook. I'll start drawing arrows just because why not? Now, if I take this, though, it does allow for a check down on the e1 square, which we're going to have to step out of the way of by force. We won't have another option there. However, there's really no... Well, there is also then this check, which would hit both the king and the rook. The rook could swing across there, saving itself and blocking the check at the same time. And it looks as though we've just won a rook there and we're going to be essentially up an exchange. So taking the rook there seems very reasonable. Not only that, but after this maneuver, where he maybe catches our rook, but our rook slings across here and saves itself and prevents the check, we'll also there be threatening to take this pawn with our queen. So not only will we be up an exchange, but I would say we would have an initiative to some extent. It would be difficult for us to move this king though. So let's say he just moves his king across, for instance, protecting the pawn. What do we then do? We could, it's difficult for us to move our queen back into the game. Here he just takes it, here he takes it, here he takes it. We can't move our king out without maybe, losing this rook that would end up there. We might have to play something like this and put our king here. But all of that is to say that I'm not 100% convinced of this little maneuver of rook takes rook, queen e1, check, king g2, queen e4, check, and then rook f3. Let's say king g7 and then g4. Then bishop h4. And yeah, we're kind of tied up a little bit there. We are kind of tied up a bit. So what if, instead of trying to save our rook, since we're taking a rook, why not rook takes rook, queen e1 check, king g2, queen e4 check, and then f3, hitting the queen and saying take the rook. And so then let's say queen takes the rook on d3, but then we play queen f7 check. Queen f7 check, let's say if king h8, well then there's queen f8 check, forcing a repetition. So that's a guaranteed draw unless after queen f7 they play bishop g7, interfering with the check. But at that point we can play queen takes b7. And although they have a check on the second rank, we can play our king to h3. I'm really not sure about it. The instinct, of course, is to take the rook. We could maybe look at the check straight away of queen takes f7 check, but after queen takes queen, rook takes rook, we've got no follow-up. So the best capture to really look at is, in fact, rook takes rook. After the check, the king steps forward and the queen comes back to e4 check. Rook f3, blocking the check. I suppose we can somewhat sit on that position. We can bring our queen, even after king g7, we can bring our queen to d2. And after d2, just play on from there. From d2 to e3. Yeah, that'll be the way to go. I'm happy with that. To me, that was the start of the puzzle, but that's where they ended it. But I'm happy that I saw a couple moves ahead of that and was still happy with the position. So as you can see, I'm not really using many arrows because it is getting closer to competition time, and it's time to get this visualization abstraction system happening in full force. So in this position here, there's no checks available except for the very obvious one, which is queen takes d1 check. And the reason that's so beautiful is because it just wins a full rook. It wins a full rook, and if the king moves out the way, well, then we can win the other rook that's already on offer on the e4 square. And if that e4 rook moves back to block the check, well, we take it as well. So there's really nothing more to say. That's just unbelievably good. Maybe I should have mentioned this, that he can drop the queen back. But in this case, it's very much the same as had he dropped the rook back. We take, take, take. All right, in this example, this pawn is utterly pinned. Just a side note, just first observation, if it moves, well, then we're going to deliver a checkmate. So that's just one thing to observe. Not the only thing by any stretch. Be right back. All right, I'm back. Just had to field a call from life. Now, as I was saying, this is a very tender point, and if this pawn moves, it would expose this very tender point. But as I'm looking at this again, I was considering the check, and if the king takes, then it's on the same diagonal as, or on a forkable square, basically. And then I realized, looking at some captures, looked at this one briefly, taking the bishop, but without a follow-up, I realized that this capture is actually really nice because we hit the queen, we're supported, the bishop's supported. So we're hitting the queen, queen's basically got to move. But if the queen just moves, well, then this move comes anyway. So basically this wins a queen for a bishop, and that's a pretty nice thing. So I'm basically going to get up to 10, and then we're going to play a training game. I'm going to call this video at an end on number 10. So let's continue going for now. This is white to move. And let's be very methodical. So in terms of checks, there are a couple with the knight. But it doesn't matter if we jump upwards to the right or downwards to the right. The bishop captures us, and we don't seem to have anything much in the way of a follow-up. So I don't really like the checks. In terms of captures, well, we've already looked at the knight jumping down to the right, capturing the pawn, and don't really love it. But how about instead, how about we take the rook with our knight, just knight takes rook. And then after bishop recaptures, we can play rook to a7 check. Well, not check, but threatening the bishop. And then if the bishop moves, we can play c7. And then if the bishop captures c7, we can take. And if any point along that line, the only other thing we have to be, well, if he then plays h2, we can play rook h7 and stop the progress of that pawn. But that pawn there on h3, this is the one we have to be careful of, because even if we take the rook, what if he just immediately plays h2? That's the danger here. That is the danger here. I suppose in that case, we can play a move. We can play a move by the name of rook a1. Rook a1, preventing the pawn from becoming a queen. So that pawn will be stuck here for the time being. And in the meantime, we've won a rook. So I assume after rook a1, he's going to want to capture this knight before it just gets away scot-free. So I assume after rook a1, he's going to play bishop captures the knight. But there we can play rook h1. And on the next move, we win the h2 pawn. I think that's going to have to be it, surely. And then we would be able to use our rook to come back up this way. Anyway, new puzzle here. New puzzle. Do we have any checks available? Well, we do. We certainly have queen h4 check. That's one possibility of several. But queen h4 is very nice because it has the added bonus of being a checkmate, as far as I can tell. All right, now here we have a way to win some material. And it's because this queen is overloaded. Now, I'm not looking at the checks because there are none. And so I started looking at the captures, and the highest value capture was this. And I think that's the correct move because it threatens the queen which is overloaded. Because the queen is under threat and because we've taken a rook, it's going to have to deal with the threat to itself and hopefully recapture our rook. But in so doing, it will give up on the bishop. So I think it's going to be take and take. All right, this is the 10th one. And I'm actually going to keep on going here because we're here to train. As much as I want to do a training game as well, we'll keep going just a little bit longer and then we'll do a training game. But this is at least getting the gears warmed up. Now there's a move that comes to mind here, and I'm looking at the checks, but I don't love them. The queen sacrificing itself for a pawn right now doesn't have adequate follow-up attached to it. But we do have the possibility of playing knight g4, which threatens the rook on e3. So knight g4 threatens the rook on g3, but it also threatens checkmate. And so we're making two threats there at the same time. Now, the obvious way to deal with that is after knight g4 for that rook to move across and attack our queen as well as defending the mating square. So we have to have a follow-up there. And thankfully, we do have such a follow-up. Because not only are we threatening the rook, not only are we threatening checkmate, but we're also threatening this pawn here with check, and when the king moves, this knight here. So all those things combined, it's very hard to go past the idea of simply knight g4. Is there anything better? Like, is this potentially a trapped queen? I don't think this queen is trapped. So yeah, I'm going to play this, and then we're going to win the knight. All right, we'll just go a little bit further, maybe two more, and then we'll be done. So here, we actually have the option of forcing a queen trade if we want. We can't dictate the terms at which the trade occurs, but we can, if we want, force the trade. Because if we play this, the queen can't move away. It can't move away because it's pinned to the king. So it can either trade itself for our queen, or he can do some other move, doesn't matter what, but some other move, and then we take the queen. One way or other, we force the queen trade. So let's say he does it himself. Well, then we have these two pawns. You know, this one being a connected pass pawn is a big deal. If we play this move, he can't move the king, as we saw. If he moves the king, he just loses the queen. And since he can't move the queen either, unless he wants to do this, which just gives us a connected pass pawn, and when he comes here, well, with a connected pass pawn, we get our king up. We're going to win with a connected pass pawn. So I'm just going to play this. And this will be the last one. Now, this is the most obvious since there's no checks available. This is the best capture. The only problem with this capture is it leaves our queen hanging. So maybe this is the most obvious capture, just winning a queen. Nothing wrong with winning a queen. And when he captures us back, we can take the rook. Now, in the resulting endgame, or the resulting position, we're also threatening this bishop, which doesn't have any real threats it can make. And while he's going to have 3 minor pieces, we're going to have 2 minor pieces and a rook. So this is just good. And I'm going to leave it there. We'll see you in the next training game.